Hey listeners, if you like this podcast, check out our other show, The Dinner Table. Listen to archived content and in-depth interviews with insiders working with food on our website at www.fredopie.com. Welcome to The Study Table, a conversation about student athletes with insiders. I'm your host, Fred Opie. A native of Towson, Maryland, Joe Breschi is the head men's lacrosse coach at the University of North Carolina, UNC. Breschi played at UNC and on 2 U.S. national teams. He shares his coaching story and why his teams practice in the morning. Enjoy the show. Joe, where did you grow up and what sports did you play?
I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, a town called Towson. So I was really playing several different sports as I kind of went through. Started football at age 7 and baseball, basketball. I played 1 year of soccer, but I was a goalie, so I was really bored, so that was it. So I went back to football and just really played as many sports. I swam in the summer on the swim team and things of that nature, and never really got involved in lacrosse until I was in ninth grade. My brother had played and really had watched him kind of go through the ranks, and he was playing at Louisville High School and then went to Denison University and played football and lacrosse there. I lived 5 minutes from Hopkins and Louisville University and Towson, obviously the Towson Tigers right there. So I was familiar with it, but had never picked up a stick. I tried out for Louisville High School as a freshman and was cut from the freshman team, and I had a choice to make. I was like, well, maybe I'll try out for baseball or, try to stick this lacrosse out and try it. So I went and played rec lacrosse as a freshman in high school. And then I was fortunate enough my sophomore, so I played rec all of freshman year, and then sophomore year I tried out for JV. And I'm still convinced to this day that the only reason I made the team is, I had a growth spurt and shot up to like 6'2", and back then, Fred, they had crease defensemen, and I wasn't the fastest cat in the world, but I could kind of cover the inside from my football background, and I could check pretty hard, and the feet were average at best. Just trying to improve my game, and then played Lock Raven Summer League and got an opportunity my junior year. I made the team. John Hawes was my defensive coordinator. Joe McFadden was the head coach. I was the backup crease defenseman to a senior who was named John Jeppy, and it just so happened on one practice right before we were going to play in our first opening scrimmage, John's cleats, he broke a shoelace in his cleats. Said, I got to go get my other pair of cleats. And John said, all right, go ahead, and Breschi, you get in there. And that was my junior year, and he put me in, and I never left. But I just kept working at the game. And
tell me, who was your favorite athlete growing up?
My favorite was probably Cal Ripken. I just loved the way he enjoyed the game. But just watching how Cal Ripken just every day was so consistent, and he loved the game, and they said he played softball and wiffle ball and all those things in the clubhouse, and just would make it fun. Mm-hmm. And, and that's the way sports should be, is to go out there and enjoy it. And he was a consummate professional. He was so consistent throughout in his play and just his demeanor and professional within the media. And, he had one, obviously the longest streak of consecutive games ever. And to be able to go and watch him live was a really neat treat as well.
What did you major in at UNC as an undergrad?
I was a communications major and was planning on going into sales, but then the lacrosse grabbed me.
Tell us the story. How did you and why did you end up becoming a coach?
It was quite the journey, and you never know. That's why I always tell our guys, I said, look, what you think you're going to do now is probably not what you're going to do, 5 years, 10 years from now. So I'm a perfect example. I, did internships throughout the 3 years, 3 summers, and then right after I graduated, I said, I'm going to take the summer and work camps. I graduated basically May of 1990, and Willie Scroggs, it was his last year as the head coach at UNC, was my senior year. Richie Mead was the assistant coach, and Dave Klarman was the assistant, and Ernie Olson and Timmy Nelson. So we had a great coaching staff, and then Dave Klarman got the job, and he said, hey, Breschi, you want to be my defensive coordinator? I said, sure, I'll do it for a year and see what happens. Well, 1991, we go 16-0 and win the national title. I'm
Oh, my gosh.
This is heaven. What could be better than this? So, so I said, I'll come back for one more year. I was getting paid, Dave likes to say it was $4,000. I think it was $2,000.
So wait a minute. So, Coach, what I'm hearing is you knew the game, but you were a cheap hire.
Yeah, it was a very cheap hire. And I think we all combined as assistants for like $10,000 total back then. And, we had two other jobs. I was delivering papers and working at the Carborough gym, a gym. And up until 1 o'clock, I'd come in and we'd put the practice plan together, all the assistants and Dave. And, maybe if I had a day off, we'd go out and play golf and put the practice plan together. And it was great. We had a great time. And then 92 came, and we went all the way to the semifinals, lost to Princeton, eventual national champion, and up at UPenn. And it was great. And I was thinking, okay, that's it. I'm out. And I get a call that summer, luck would have it, and we had beaten in the quarterfinals Brown University. Don Starger was the coach. He leaves for UVA, and the offensive coordinator, Pete Lasagna, takes over. They interviewed 4 guys for that position up there, and 3 of them called me and said, "Hey, would you be my defensive coordinator if I get it?" I was like, "Oh yeah, what's the pay?" It was like $23,000 and benefits, both of which I didn't have at Carolina.
As a full-time coordinator, that is interesting. As a full-time coordinator, no benefits and barely a salary.
Yeah, $23,000 and full benefits, which was fantastic. And Pete Lasagna offered me the job, and I was ecstatic. And then I said, "Pete, where the heck is Rhode Island?" So I went up to Brown University, and I loved it. I was 24 years old, and head assistant and defensive coordinator, and was still a young guy and befriended a bunch of guys and coached Andy Towers and coached with him at Brown. At 93, we're 10-3, didn't get in the tournament, and then the next year we went to the Final Four. So we made a great run, and Brown's only trip to the Final Four was my second year there. Pete was such a wonderful guy to work with, as was Dave Klarman, and so I spent 5 years there, met my wife, Julie, and, it was interesting because I was 5 years there, and just like in 92, after my 2 years at Carolina, I was thinking of getting out. I was like, well, maybe I'm not going to get the opportunity. So, I talked to STX and Brian and some other places to maybe go and be a sales rep. All of a sudden, I get a call from Cornell. Richie Moran retires, and I get a call from, Ohio State to interview. Go through the process. Long story short, I go out to Ohio State. I interview. I was the last of 7 guys who interviewed, and I come back on a Monday, and I'm going to Cornell on Wednesday for that interview, which I was like ecstatic about. And Andy Geiger, I still remember Andy Geiger, the AD at Ohio State, calls me up at 11:30 at night and says, "Joe, we want to offer you the job." And I'm just like, "Oh my God, this is unbelievable!" So I was ecstatic, and I said, "Hey, it's Monday night, 11:30." I said, "I have an interview on Wednesday at Cornell." The savvy athletic director of Andy Geiger says, "You have till Tuesday night to let me know."
Wow.
So, and I get it. I get the business, but he was fantastic. So I came back. I called up Andy Noel, who was assistant AD at the time. He's now the athletic director there at Cornell. And he said, "There's 2 guys. It's you and Petramala." And I said, "Well, I got a bird in hand, and I know how good of a coach and a guy Dave Petramala is. So I'm gonna head out to Ohio State and basically start the program." And I went out for a year, got my feet on the ground, and as a 28-year-old head coach, the cool thing about it was we were a program that was a glorified club program at the time, and I was able to build it the way I wanted to with my philosophy. I made a ton of mistakes, really learned from the kids and the student athletes and administration and other coaches around that. Ohio State, and Archie Griffin was my boss, and as assistant AD, and I just what a wonderful experience and a place to learn the game. My wife and I were married after my first year there, and we had all 5 of our kids out there, and I think about that experience, and Carolina's really the only place I would ever left Ohio State for.
Joe, tell me, what's it like to go from being an assistant? And by this time, you had been assistant for quite a bit of time. And I'm sure there's going to be some assistant coaches, first assistants listening to this interview. What is the difference between the job as the assistant coach, whether you're the first assistant, D coordinator, and being the head coach? And let me preface it with this. You may know that I was Hank Jansik's defensive coordinator at Gettysburg. I absolutely loved being the defensive coordinator and assistant coach. I think the assistant coach is one of the best jobs in the world. Dave Slavkowski, as you know, was Dick Adele's assistant. I mean, just a defensive genius at Army, and then he goes to Maryland, and he keeps that position. And I know a lot of people are like, why isn't this guy interviewing for a head coach job? Because I think he knows how sweet it is to be an assistant, if you know what I mean. So tell people, what's the difference?
Yeah. Well, and that's a great point, Freddie. I think the biggest thing is just the transition. All of a sudden, the responsibilities elevate with every other thing that you don't think about that is not on the field. And the cool thing, and I love being an assistant coach. I'm 100% behind you there. I loved it because I had a great relationship with the coaches. I was able to be a sponge with how Dave Klarman ran things and how Pete Lasagna ran things, and I would tweak things, would take a ton of what they taught me, and we do X's and O's, and you learn, and then you'd be able to go home. You obviously you recruit, you go home, but when you become the head coach, all of a sudden there's all these other administrative things coming at you, and alumni relations, and visiting alums, and the recruiting aspect, and what happens off the field is now your responsibility to your, from a student athlete standpoint, and making great decisions. So everything kind of falls on your plate. So if you want to say there's a little bit less stress, I'd say yes, as an assistant. And certainly from a head coaching standpoint, I highly recommend the coaching profession for sure, because I think in the lacrosse community in particular, there's so many great people in it. If you want a little less stress in your life, continue to maintain that assistant coaching position. But I really feel like everybody should, dip the toe in the water as a head coach, because I think you can appreciate a little bit more what you had as an assistant, but also that transition piece is big. And, one of the guys, I've been fortunate enough to coach with some great coaches, and like I have now with Dave Metzbauer and Chris Weiss and Brian Holman, and of course Pat Myers, and then Nick Myers I coached with at Ohio State for several years, and Anthony Gallardi at Towson, and but Nick, just his transition from assistant coach to head coach at Ohio State, it was great to see. Such a wonderful guy, and we had so many talks, so many great talks about the transition piece, and it's not easy, but if you're true to yourself and be yourself as you go through it, and learn how to handle some of those things, off the field things that are so important with the student athletes, and they know how much you care about them. I think it makes that transition a little smoother.
We'll be right back. For more interviews and related content, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and other podcast distributors. Also, check out our website at www.fredopie.com. Ask questions on Facebook at Frederick Douglass Opie and on Twitter at Dr. Fred D. Opie. For information about advertising on the show, please email us at fdopie@gmail.com. That's fdopie@gmail.com.
If you like the show, check out Fred's interview with Katie Stone, coach of the Harvard women's hockey team and the former coach of the U.S. Olympic team.
The biggest changes in youth sports and young athletes, and it's due to their parents too. I mean, is that they don't have the ability to self-evaluate anymore, or they're unwilling to do it. And I knew when I didn't play well. I knew when I wasn't prepared, and I didn't go looking around the room to try to pin it on somebody else.
Now back to the show. No, I'm thinking about Wade Phillips, who just wins the Super Bowl with the Denver Broncos. I mean, just the defense was just phenomenal. I mean, just I mean, after a while, you felt bad for Cam because he was getting off his butt so many times, you know?
Yeah.
It was phenomenal. Now, the guy is the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys and is not very successful. And I think a lot of people don't realize Bill Belichick, great assistant coach in New York for the Giants, and then he goes out to Cleveland Browns, and he's an absolute failure. Comes back and does a tremendous job with the Patriots. When you think about these scenarios where people go from being, you know, the assistant, great defensive coordinators, and then they get in the head coach job, they fail, but then they seem to come back and they're extremely successful. How do you look at that scenario in your own situation?
Well, my situation was a little bit unique. I had a great opportunity to basically build the program at Ohio State, and you know the expectations were really low when I got there. We didn't have scholarships. It was kind of as I mentioned, a glorified club team, and you know I was able to kind of in my own vision and own philosophy kind of build the program and make mistakes and make those changes on the fly and really gradually bring the program up to where, you know, my first scholarship, I went in 98. So 99 was my first season. Then my first scholarship group was 2000. So by the time they graduated, their senior year, 2003, which we had some great players and Mike Norton and Pat Myers, and we had a host of really talented young men. They went to the NCAA tournament. So I was able to build it in my own eyes. And for me, that was the best thing. I would not have had the opportunity at Carolina if I didn't have the experiences that I've had out at Ohio State. So I think, you know, just like you mentioned some of those great NFL coaches out there like Belichick, you know, he went and had his peaks and valleys. Now, the NFL is a heck of a lot different than my experience at Ohio State, but similar in a sense. He was able to make some of those changes and some of the failures, and he learned from them. And he got himself better and has a great rapport with the players. And, you know, the players at any level, man, if they don't know that you care about them as individuals and as people, that you know, then they're not going to play for you. The key in any profession is to treat the people around you with great respect, and including the student athletes, and build that mutual respect factor that they know you're in their corner and that they're going to give it everything they have when they're out in the field.
Tell me, when you were a first-year assistant at Carolina, tell me about the transition from being a teammate to a coach with some of the guys who you played with. How did that work out?
Well, that's a great point. I had some great defenders. You know, I had my cousin Chuck Breschi, Brian Kelly, who's a coach over there at Calvert Hall. I had Alex Martin, Graham Harden, who was Defensive Player of the Year in '91. And my first meeting with them, and they'll probably tell you this, I walked over and, you know, look, I spent 3 years enjoying my social life with those guys as well. So the transition was pretty easy for me. I didn't hang out with them for the next 2 years, but I did say to them, I said, look, you guys know the defense, you know the schemes. You know, I've been fortunate enough to start for 3 years of my 4 years here, and I said, if you need help in anything, let me know. But I can't, with all due respect, hang out with the guys anymore socially, because you have to draw that separation and that line in the sand a little bit. And I think they respected that aspect of, hey, I may not be out there socially with you, but there's a mutual respect because I played with you. We played at a very high level together, went to a couple Final Fours together, and it was it was kind of seamless because I set the tone early with, you know, look, man, you know, we're all peers here, and let's go out there and have fun, enjoy the game, and enjoy each other's experience.
Joe, tell me, how did getting married and having kids change you as a coach?
Oh, my gosh. I'm glad you asked that question because, you know, that changed me, you know, full circle. Because I went in there at Ohio State when I was 28 years old. And my first year, my chest was out. I'm going to make changes. I'm going to do all these things and this and that. It allowed me to have, you know, when I got married and my first child, Michael, for the first 4 or 5 months of his life, he was colicky. And you talk about having patience. There was not a lot of sleep in those first couple of months there. But, you know, overall, just having kids has allowed me to have patience. And I still do have 4 beautiful girls at home. And Sam, Abby, Lucy, and Emily. And they're from 14 to 8 years old, and they're just wonderful kids. But they make mistakes, but it's not because they're not trying to do the right thing. And just like kids on the field, they're trying to do everything they can to do what you ask them to do. And I think that transition piece, and I told my guys at Ohio State this kind of after my first 2 or 3 years, and we started having them over for dinner, and it was like, look, man, you guys are doing everything you can to be as good of a player as you can. You're trying to do your job to the best of your ability. And back when I first started, I thought, geez, they're not doing it. And I was hard on them. I was tough on them. And, I think there are times for that, but there's also times to understand that, no one's trying to fail. They're trying to do the best they can. So really having kids has allowed me to have more patience in my coaching.
Tell me, what's the biggest adjustment you see your first-year players making or having to make when they come to UNC and when they're playing the ACC?
Well, I think the first thing for any freshman is being away from home. They're used to whether mom's waking them up or the family's around a lot. They're away from home. They're living in the dorms. They need to structure their time. For us, it's pretty easy. We practice in the morning and classes in the afternoon and study hall at night and tutors and so forth. So we have a pretty structured program for them. So off the field, we try to make it as structured as they had it their senior year in high school. For on the field, I really feel like the speed of the game, Fred, is the biggest transition for them, but it really only takes the fall. We talk about doing a little extra, those guys doing extra off the field in preparation in their own game to build up. So we have a bunch of wall ball routines and things that they can do off the field to help their own game. But I really feel like the speed of play is the biggest transition on the field, but it doesn't take long because everybody around them is playing fast. And I think once they get used to that in the fall, the spring is a little bit easier come January.
Coach, tell me a little bit about your decision to do practices in the morning. Do you make study table requirements? You get a certain GPA, you can get out.
Well, I love the morning practice. I think it's there's so many reasons I switched to it at Ohio State. Once the academics, being a big school at Ohio State, and certainly here at North Carolina, same thing. There's several different sections of each class is offered, and we get priority scheduling, so we're able to schedule our classes on Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 11 o'clock on, and Tuesday, Thursday from 12:30 on. And, with college, you're taking 4 or 5 classes a semester, so you're able to kind of spread that out and get those priority classes set in the afternoon. So for me, number one, it's discipline and commitment. So right off the bat, you're looking, okay, if I'm going to commit myself to this program, if I'm going to have the discipline to get up every morning at 7:30, get to practice for 8 o'clock, film session, scout review, and out on the practice field from 8:30 to, 10 o'clock on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then the same thing, 8 o'clock to 10, and then weight room from 10:15 to 11:15 on Tuesday, Thursdays. I'm going to need that commitment. So it really kind of, when I got here, my thought process was, first and foremost, we need discipline and we need, basically paying attention to detail and commitment. Putting them in that structure of morning practice, afternoon classes, and study hall at night, I think was huge. And for me, selfishly, nothing's more important than my family. For me to be able to be home, have dinner with my family, and at 6 o'clock every night, read to them, and, back when they were little toddlers, just being around them before they go to bed and having that relationship, because I'm out before they get up for school, and for the most part, and that to me is so key. And I think the student athletes appreciate that as well, to see that family is a priority, not just talk. It's a priority. Academic piece too. You have a good sense that guys are not going to roll over and bang the alarm for practice. They may bang the alarm or turn the alarm off for that 8 a.m. French class if they had it. It's good. It starts their day. The guys love it. They all feel like it prepares them for the real world, too, when they move forward. So there's a lot of reasons I do it, but mainly the discipline and commitment level by the student athletes and myself to be able to be home with my family as well. And then you asked about the tutoring and the study hall. We have 8 hours a week of mandatory study hall for all incoming freshmen, a meeting with their counselor that's tutors. We have a great MAT program that's set for each individual student athlete that steps in on campus. So it's their own academic plan, which basically says, hey, if you're a little lower on your SAT in math, we're going to get you a math tutor ahead of time before you struggle. So, some guys are assigned tutors right when they step on campus for a certain class or two, and then the other 4 or 5 hours are independent studying. After a certain GPA, we say after a 2.5 freshman year, you're able to qualify out of study hall, but all the resources are there until you graduate from UNC.
To check out our podcast archive, suggest show topics, and advertise on the show, and to book me as a guest and or speaker, visit our website, www.fredopie.com. That's www.fredopie.com. For information about advertising on the show, please email us at fdopie@gmail.com. That's fdopie@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and be good.